As the talks begin for a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip in Egypt, these talks are taking place between all of the parties involved, including the Palestinian leadership, American officials, the Israeli delegation, and also they are concerning inner Palestinian negotiations too. The Palestinian Authority, the Palestinian resistance factions are also conducting meetings to talk about the vision for the future, because the developments include certain things that relate to the prospect of what they call a Palestinian state that is quite far from what is being portrayed in the media. Now, Donald Trump officially pushed for this move and had somewhat of an endorsement to the Hamas response that took place when Donald Trump published their response on his social media, despite the fact that he previously criticized them and still does very heavily. Someone didn't really like that. It was none other than Benjamin Netanyahu. Trump called Netanyahu, and Netanyahu responded to that positivity that Donald Trump came with. Trump was hoping to get like a celebration almost from Netanyahu. But Netanyahu told him, there's nothing to celebrate here. There is no progress. Then, reportedly, Donald Trump told him, you're always so effing negative, according to this report here in Axios. Now, although they're on the same path in so many cases, clearly there are certain differences here, especially with the sensitivity of Benjamin Netanyahu to portray anything coming from the Palestinian side as hopeful by any means. Netanyahu was hoping to flip the table against the Palestinian side, isolate the Palestinian side, all of a sudden have Israel being embraced again by international countries, showing Israel as if it's the actual side looking for peace, and that the Palestinians are the obstacle in that case. And what Donald Trump did clearly did not help. He published the same confirmation that came from the Palestinian resistance, viewing the efforts as positive, confirming that they are willing to release the prisoners of war in the right conditions, but also in effect denying by simply not addressing other elements of the Trump proposal that was heavily amended by Benjamin Netanyahu and his delegation that included Ron Dermer at the time, after Donald Trump met with the Arab and Muslim delegation. The talks are intense, but the time frame that Donald Trump is looking to accomplish it in, to execute the deal, are very unlikely to happen, to say the least. Donald Trump is very keen on getting this sorted within the next 5 days for his Nobel Peace Prize nomination, but chances are it's going to take longer than that because of the developments on the ground and also what is required logistically to release the Israeli prisoners of war from the Gaza Strip. What is actually happening on the ground? Yesterday we spoke about the fact that Egypt started to firstly open the Rafah crossing, secondly started to allow heavy equipment and machinery inside of the Gaza Strip, and now there were more confirmations of what exactly that entails. What is Egypt doing with this equipment inside of the Gaza Strip? And they actually started to build large camps for the Palestinian population to remain in areas in the north where they were displaced from, and so that they cannot give Benjamin Netanyahu the idea or the thought of sending the population anywhere else, confirming Egypt's position in supporting the Palestinians remaining on their land. And also strategically, that is a move that supports Egypt. They consider this a matter of national security. They don't want Palestinian exodus and ethnic cleansing to the Sinai Peninsula, because they know it's being prepared by Israel following that, an excuse to enter Sinai. Therefore, Egypt played very quickly on that part, not only for the relief, of course, of the Palestinian people, first and foremost, but also because it again serves an Egyptian interest too, to have the population in safe areas. Also, many people are in the streets in Gaza without any shelter whatsoever after Israel's barbaric campaigns all across of the Gaza Strip. A lot is happening in Egypt, and one of the main things that are happening is the fact that the head of Hamas's political bureau, Khalil al-Hayya, is in Egypt. This is the same man that Israel tried to assassinate in Qatar several weeks back. That attempt failed miserably. And now he went to Cairo. But although we're talking about talks and ceasefire and potential deal, Egypt is not taking any chances or any risks with the arrival of the Hamas delegation. And the report said that tight security and jamming systems were deployed around the Hamas delegation's route in Cairo. That the team of Hamas will engage in indirect negotiations with Israel, and then another team is participating in Palestinian meetings to unify ranks. Egypt is very interested in the Palestinian side having a unified position because it further strengthens its approach globally and in the face of the Zionists too. Therefore, leading to better chances of having a better vision. Even now, the Palestinian president, the head of the PLO, an all-time foe of Hamas, is welcoming their response and saying that now the authority in Gaza will belong to the state of Palestine. He's not even mentioning like only his organization, the PLO and what have you. And from an Egyptian perspective, they're very interested in that succeeding, and the talks are indeed intense simultaneously with the talks of the delegation of Hamas in the face of the Israeli delegation too. But this move that came from Egypt to protect the Hamas delegation from any potential assassination shows you just how much there is a lack of trust in the other side. You're talking about an Israeli delegation being present there, yet from an Egyptian perspective, they are not even taking risks with Israelis on Egyptian soil trying to reach a ceasefire agreement. And although the United States provided Qatar with more guarantees, Benjamin Netanyahu called the Qatari leadership when he was with Donald Trump, who reportedly forced him to do so, showed regret on the killing of a Qatari at the time, saying that Israel has no plans to do that again. And now Donald Trump confirming, and the United States administration, that if any attack occurs against Qatar, this affects the United States national security and interest, and the United States has the right and power to respond to it diplomatically and also militarily if required too. Of course, that's for Qatar, but it shows you that from an Egyptian perspective, who are also in very good relations with the United States, they're not relying on anyone, they're not taking any chances. And the measures that are being reported as security for the Hamas delegation are some of the most intense that have been ever seen recently for the Palestinian delegation. We already know that Egypt tightened its security for the Palestinian delegation several months back, and also more after the assassination in Qatar. There were previous reports that Egypt thwarted an assassination attempt that wasn't later executed because Egypt took several actions to prevent Israel from conducting that move. But things are still very, very tense between them, and there are developments on the ground. Some are still saying that there's a lot to work on here. But again, what we need to remember is that the majority of things are not being published. What are the Israelis now saying? Yesterday, the Minister of National Security, Itamar Ben-Gvir, called this a national defeat if it goes ahead in this formula, if Hamas even so much as remains in Gaza, although Hamas said clearly we're not going to be governing Gaza, but a technocratic transitional government in preparation for the establishment of a Palestinian state afterwards. Now, the largest Israeli mainstream media outlets are saying Hamas is not going to disappear. And they're lying blatantly to the whole world by saying, and that was not a goal set by the cabinet in the war. Disregarding the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu always, time after time, used to say he wants to eliminate them, and he wants to eliminate them, and he wants to eliminate them. And now, when there are certain prospects to reach a deal, all of a sudden Israeli media says, oh, actually it wasn't the intention anyway. So what are they saying exactly? Well, the Israeli media is preparing the Israeli public opinion for Hamas to remain inside of the Gaza Strip. As a matter of fact, in this article too, they also stated that even the talks about Hamas's disarming, Israel knows that it's going to be very difficult at the moment, you know. And from Benjamin Netanyahu's perspective, although he previously said that Israel can still take military action to disarm Hamas later on, he also said that diplomatically that can happen too. But if it doesn't happen, we will do it the hard way. Doing it the hard way failed for 2 years. Israel, the fact that Israel is negotiating is a sign of the failure of the military campaign of Israel. Otherwise, if you did have a military campaign where you could enforce all of your political demands and translate that on the ground, well, then why didn't you continue with this campaign? And why did you have to make these concessions and put yourself in a defensive, supposedly a defensive mode inside of the Gaza Strip? If Israel was still so strong and capable, why did they enter into a ceasefire agreement before and retreat from certain areas that they considered to be so strategic and said that they will never withdraw from? Now even talks in Israel are preparing the Israeli public opinion that very heavy sentence Palestinian prisoners will be released. Names like Marwan al-Barghouthi. There are other serious names from a Palestinian perspective, but they're preparing the public opinion. These articles are also talking about the fact that this temporary drawing of the new map in Gaza that Donald Trump published isn't really the final deal, and that Hamas will be insisting on Israel withdrawing further, and that Israel will have to withdraw further eventually. But they're still not going all out. They're still not talking about everything that's going to happen later on, and they're trying not to publish too much information now, so that it doesn't look like an absolute and total embarrassment or a national defeat, like what Ben Gvir told Netanyahu and the Israeli public yesterday, should this go ahead, and Hamas will remain inside of the Gaza Strip, even not as a ruling power. So in effect, we have a situation here where the talks are serious, they are being conducted, they are happening. We have an administration in the United States, whether for personal and tight reasons or more genuine reasons to actually reach an end to the war, are pushing for this to get sorted. Israel, on the other hand, is feeling some sort of pressure from Donald Trump. The Israeli media is saying that it was Donald Trump's pressure that forced Benjamin Netanyahu to stop this campaign. Netanyahu was surprised by these moves from Donald Trump to endorse or at least publish the statements of Hamas, confirming that they are interested in a ceasefire agreement and confirming that they will go ahead with certain things on the right conditions. But what's happening on the ground is a translation. That doesn't guarantee the success. However, it does show that there are certain political moves happening on the ground that are being backed more and more by many countries. And Israel reached a point inside of the Gaza Strip where they can no longer militarily progress any further than what they have so far. 2 years of full-blown genocide, 2 years of the equivalent of 8 nuclear bombs, over 60,000 martyrs, over 250,000 martyred and wounded altogether. And the Palestinian resistance, not only did they not raise the white flag, they raised the black flag against the Israeli genocide forces and increased their attacks against the genocide forces in Gaza that became more lethal in quality, in execution, more successful, and more advanced even in multiple parts of the Gaza Strip that Israel declared were clear from the resistance fighters. Therefore, Israel was forced into this because they failed. Israel did not have the upper hand. Benjamin Netanyahu is trying to portray what they're doing as a success, and due to the military pressure, that is due to the military failure. And the fact that Netanyahu and his delusions and dreams of expelling the Palestinian people, eliminating the Hamas, and resettling in Gaza have all vanished. And now there are more talks that the agents of the IDF inside of the Gaza Strip, including the ISIS-linked militias that were operating against the Gazan population, are now in talks trying to find mediators to have a peace process and negotiations with Hamas so they don't come after them and target them. Because the Palestinian resistance was going after the traitors, Israel's agents in Gaza, for many months now. And they told the head of the movement they're coming after him. So that shows you that they feel like they're being neglected by Israel. They feel like things are going the opposite way. The fact that Israel retreated to the pre-Gideon's chariots 2 borders, whilst indicating that they're willing to withdraw further to allow the release, shows you that there are certain developments. Of course, both Netanyahu and Donald Trump are capable of exploding everything. However, in the meantime, and despite the complexity of the issues being spoken about and negotiated, the negotiations are still moving and are still taking place with a lot of effort, especially from Egypt, to bring the majority of the views closer and closer so that the deal can get executed as soon as possible.